back, and as promised, we've got a very special guest with us this evening, Jim Rogers, who needs no introduction, but he's run big funds that have raised 4,200% over 10 years when the S&P went up 50%. He's obviously a best-selling author, and he's predicted much of what's now happening, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'd like him to break down what he's accurately predicted. I've got some of the news articles here and what he sees coming up in the future. His latest best-selling book is A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investing. Of course, you can also go to his website, Jim Rogers, that's ROGERS.com. And he's also a Guinness Book of World Record holder on multiple fronts. We'll get him to talk some about that. Now, he joins us here while he's on his exercise bike in the beautiful, I guess, semi-tropical environs of Singapore. And so we turn now to Jim Rogers joining us here at InfoWars Nightly News. Jim, thank you for joining us.
I am delighted. And yes, it is Singapore. We're on the equator. In Singapore, it's either always hot or always hot and raining.
Well, I tell you, I've probably watched you 300 times on national television, Fox, CNBC, you name it, but I don't think I've ever seen you on a exercise bike. So we're honored that you're doing this with us.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm multitasking. I try to get two things done at once. So if I fall off the bike, you'll be the first to know.
Okay, Jim. Wow. Now, listen, there's a lot of stuff written in the press. I want to make sure this is accurate. A few days ago, a bunch of reports came out that you said global collapse, a done deal. What's your view on the world economy right now and where it's going?
Well, Alex, every 4 to 6 years in America, we've had a slowdown or a recession ever since the Republic, the beginning of the Republic. So we're overdue for one, the end of 2011, 2012, 2013. So it always happens. It's going to happen again, despite what politicians or central bankers tell you. The next time around, it's going to be very bad. It's just as, 2002, we had a slowdown. 2008, it was much worse. 2012, 2013 is going to be worse still because we shot all our bullets. I mean, the U.S. cannot quadruple its debt again. We cannot print more money again, staggering amounts of money again. So it's going to be a mess, a huge mess. There's nothing we can do about it.
Now, let's talk about, because I know you don't like to toot your own horn, but I've printed up a bunch of news articles here. I remember you 3-4 years ago saying what they did wasn't going to work, that you'd see all sorts of currencies going down globally, that commodities was the place to go, and gold's gone from $300 to $1,800, silver's gone from $5 to $30+. You're saying get into farmland. Toot your own horn, though, just so people can understand why you made the predictions you did. Quite a bit of what you predicted's come true. Break down how you were able to make those predictions, and then what you see coming in the near future, and then even the medium term.
Well, Alex, partly because of I know what's happened before in the world. In the early 1990s, Japan had a problem like this. They refused to let people fail. They propped everybody up. You remember the term zombie banks, zombie companies? Well, it's 21 years later. Japan is still suffering because they didn't accept reality. They didn't take the pain. The Japanese stock market is down 80%. That's 80% in the last 21 years because they refuse to accept reality. America's going to have the same problem. We're going to try to prop everybody up. That does not work. In Sweden, at the same time, 21 years ago, in Scandinavia, I should say, they took the pain. It was horrible for 2 years, 3 years. But since then, after starting over, taking the losses, taking the pain, Scandinavia's had a wonderfully vibrant and dynamic economy. It just doesn't work to prop up failure, to reward incompetence. You have to, that's what capitalism's all about. Competent people come in, take over the failed assets from the failed people, and start over. What we're doing in America, we're taking the assets away from the competent people, giving them to the incompetent people, and saying, okay, guys, now you can compete with the competent people with their money. It's outrageous morality. Not that politicians care about morality, but it's horrible economics. It cannot and will not work.
Well, I'm certainly no rocket scientist. I mean, I'm not a guy that's made people tens of millions of dollars like yourself and, has a 30, 40-year track record of doing it. But studying economics, studying history, when you see a bunch of countries start basically turning up the printing presses and then paying for the garbage derivatives with more printing press money, it seems like I've seen all these third world countries go that direction. So correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, is that why basically you're saying that there's no way to turn this around? Or what are some of the other factors that feed into that?
Well, Alex, the cure for too much debt is not more debt, although in Washington they seem to think, well, we had too much consumption, too much debt, so let's solve that problem with more consumption and more debt. I mean, it's astonishing that grown-ups would say something like that out loud. If it were that simple, every country in the world would be prosperous. But what's always happened is you pile up debt, that fails, and then they start printing money. If all you had to do was pile up debt and print money, Zimbabwe would be the richest country in the world right now. Many countries would be extremely rich. It doesn't work. Economics is pretty simple. If you spend money you don't have, you either pay it back or go bankrupt or suffer the consequences. We've already had one lost decade in America. We're going to have 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many lost decades we're going to have until we accept reality.
Okay. Then just to be clear, then, you are saying that a global financial collapse is a foregone conclusion, no way to turn it around, no way to stop it now?
Well, I'm saying yes. The next time we have a recession, and we're going to have one, I guarantee you, it's going to be worse than anything we've experienced in the last few decades because of the staggering amounts of debt that have been built up in the U.S. and in Europe. Now, there's a way. Sure, we could take an alternative course. We could accept reality. We could let people fail. All those guys on Wall Street should have failed. The idea that they're still driving their Lamborghinis is outrageous as far as they're all getting their bonuses. Outrageous as far as I'm concerned. You and I are paying for it. We could do that. We could let them fail. We could take our pain, admit our mistakes. It would be very bad for 2 or 3 years, Alex. There's no question. It would be a mess. But the alternative is to have 10, 20, 30 years of more lost decades and lost years from our lives.
All right, Jim Rogers is our guest. We're honored to have him and a premier interview with him on the exercise bike. I'm actually loving this. I think this is pretty media worthy. And again, we appreciate your time and joining us. Shifting gears to North America. I know you're out in Singapore now, and later I'll ask you why you're there and your prognosis in this global meltdown for Asia versus Europe, North America, Latin America, Africa, basically your global perspective and what you're investing in right now. But here at home, Ron Paul predicted all of this 30 years ago on sound Austrian economics. I know that you study a little bit as well. And now he is being demonized, and that's when he's lucky. They've done scientific studies now that show that he's getting the least amount of time at the debates, that when he does get coverage, it's negative, also when he wins first, second, or third place, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, now CBS will not show him in the poll rankings. So if he gets number 1, they say number 2 was number 1. Or if he gets number 3, they skip him and move number 4 into number 3. And we just caught CBS over the weekend doing it again. It became a national news story. But wait, it gets better. It was a 90-minute debate, Jim, but only an hour was televised. Of the televised debate, he was given 90 seconds. And it turns out a memo came out when Rick Perry was given, like 8 minutes, Mitt Romney more than 10. I mean, if this isn't a rigged horse race, what's your view on that and why they're scared of Ron Paul?
Well, it's clear, and I've read the same things you have, it's clear that they're biased against Ron Paul. I don't know why. I guess the only reason is because he's the only one who talks good sense. He's the only one who knows how to solve the problems. I happen to agree with nearly everything he said and have for a long time. And it's just so different to what all these journalists have been brought up reading and believing and writing. I mean, they all go to the same schools where they're taught Keynes and failure. And so they think that this guy who's got a different view must be, and let's ignore him. Unfortunately for them, he's the only one, not the only one, but he's one of the few who's got it right. And somebody, I don't know if the electorate will get it in time, but he's one of the few who knows what has to be done.
Jim, looking at history, looking at geopolitical movements, looking at finance that you've studied so long and investment so accurately, and that's the real gauge of a tree is its fruits. Your fruits have been very successful and stable over a long period of time. Well, seriously, looking into your crystal ball, I mean, and then looking at the United States, it's clear they're not going to listen to Ron Paul. He is the only one of those Republicans that is talking sense, and one of only a few prominent people in the U.S. talking sense. The establishment wants to go the same direction, crony capitalism, insiders being guaranteed by the public, so much you and Congressman Paul have talked about. And now the elite are financing the welfare class to be their political army to demand more and more off the tit. And I see historically real calamities, real collapse, real social unrest here in the U.S. Obama has already tried to sick the Occupy Wall Street people on the middle class, claiming, you know, that he's anti-corruption in Wall Street when he's financed by it. So what do you see for America and Europe? I mean, do you see a lot of really unstable things happening? Because it's clear they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to Ron Paul. They know you're right. It's why they're scared of you. So is this ship going to hit the iceberg? What's going to happen? What do you see? Where do you see America in 5 years?
Well, first, there's also a guy named Gary Johnson who is running for nomination. He seems to get it, too, as well. I mean, he hasn't been as prominent so long as Ron has, but he also seems to get it. But what's going to happen? It's what I've said many times. There's going to be more social unrest all over the world. We've already had some governments fail and some countries fail. Alex, and a lot worse. As the price of food skyrockets, as the economy doesn't get better, more and more people are going to be in the streets. Unfortunately, we now have a generation worldwide which expects free lunches. And unfortunately, the money's running out now. We cannot afford free lunches anymore, and you're going to see turmoil. You're going to see currency turmoil. You're going to see more inflation, higher prices, higher interest rates. It's not going to be fun. Be careful, Alex. Be careful and be prepared.
Are you hinting at be careful being in America? Is that why you ran? I'm not saying you ran in a bad way. I'm tempted to run to Singapore or somewhere else. Is that why you've gone to Singapore? Because you have traveled the whole world. You've won the Guinness Book of World Record, you know, for traveling the world on a motorcycle, for traveling in a car. You've been all over the planet. Is that why you've decided to go to Singapore? Because I know my wife has said to me, she's pretty smart. She's like, we need to get the hell out of this country because we can't even travel. I mean, the TSA wants to stick their hands down my daughter's pants. They want to grab my wife's breast. And my wife said to me last week, she said, listen, this is turning into Nazi Germany, and we need to be smart enough to get out of here. And I said, well, I'm going down with a ship on air. And she said, okay. But, I mean, is that what you're hinting at?
Well, first of all, you can go down with a ship on air somewhere else now with the computers. I mean, here I am. I'm in Singapore, and you and I are having a perfectly competent and civilized conversation. That's not the reason I left. I'm sure maybe it had some factor. No, I have two little girls. They were speaking, they were Chinese because I'm convinced that the best gift that I can give my children is to know perfect Mandarin Chinese, and to know Asia. I couldn't do that in New York. I love New York. You know, I'm still an American citizen, still an American taxpayer, but I want to raise my children preparing them 21st century. I don't like what's happening in America. I hate it. Whenever I fly to America, I'm always a little bit worried because I know I'm going to have to go through American customs, American immigration, and I'm an American citizen. And I'm going to have to go with the TSA, and I'm always worried about that. You don't have to traveling elsewhere in the world, so you should listen to your wife. she's right, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. But, Alex, I'm here for my kids. A lot of people move to different school districts or different places where they can have a good music teacher or football coach or whatever. I'm in Asia preparing my children hope for the 21st century. It's that simple. Many people move for their kids. I'm moving for my kids.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You know, they call it the Chinese century that's coming up, or the Asian century, population-wise, technology, people that are willing to work hard. You know, there's still a lot of Americans that are willing to work hard. It's just that we've got to fit the bill for the rich bankers that want the bailouts and the welfare queens and the rest of them. And I certainly have to, you know, admire your decision and courage to uproot New York. That is a great city. And move over there. But certainly Westerners who can speak perfect Mandarin Chinese and that do have the connections there, they're going to do a lot better than people over here on average. And what does your book get into? Because I haven't had a chance to read it. I have ordered it. I do intend to read your latest book. I read one of your earlier books. But what is your latest book about the gift of your children dealing with?
Well, Alex, I've had, you know, failures in my life. I had a few triumphs in my life. So I realized I better write this down. And it started out as a magazine article in Japan, actually. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more articles. And so we turned it into a book. It's things I have learned over my life, things to do. I came to parenthood late. Alex, I was always against being a parent. I felt sorry for my friends who had children. I couldn't believe what a horrible waste of time, energy, money children were. I was so wrong, so wrong, which I came to realize. And so I started stuff down as a way to give it to my children, some of my losses, some of my successes. And it's a little book with things to do, things to watch out for. And hopefully in 30 or 40 years, these little girls will be very successful and happy because of some of the things their father taught them.
Well, I agree with you that something chemical happened when I had children where I started working harder, making better decisions, more focused. Something chemical happens when you have children. I've got a son and 2 daughters. And really, I think you stop even thinking about yourself so much and now see things in a global view of the future of those children. But then not just those children, you start seeing all the other future generations as the human community. And you realize the one way we all do live forever is if this species makes it. And when we allow a bunch of collectivist control freaks to run society, I'm not sure that humanity is going to survive. What's your view on the human species overall, Jim?
Alex, as you mentioned before, I've driven around the world twice, once on a motorcycle, once in a car. I spent 5 years seeing the world close to the ground. I'm optimistic about mankind. Mankind has survived unbelievable setbacks in our history. You know, the Sahara Desert used to be farmland. It's now the size of the U.S. Well, mankind survived that change. You can go lots of places. You'll see societies which disappeared, countries, cities, nations, totally disappeared. But mankind has always survived. Hasn't been fun. We've had some terrible wars, epidemics, plagues. But mankind, I'm confident of that. I mean, I'm not an environmentalist by any stretch, because I know mankind's going to survive. No matter how foolish we are to each other, we will survive. It may not be in New York City, but mankind's going to survive somewhere, and our grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be living somewhere, surviving, and being very happy.
Jim, I want to look at Europe and what's happening with the crisis over there, and then any other points you want to make. And we really appreciate your time and look forward to, now that you've offered to come on sometimes during your hour-and-a-half exercise regimen, we would love to do an extended exercise class and financial guru discussion with Jim Rogers of jimrogers.com. And, of course, we'll also be posting this at Infowars.com. But look at the London Telegraph. The EU's architects never meant it to be a democracy. The rise of a technocracy has always been part of the plan for Europe. Here's another one, Time Magazine. Do Greece and Italy amount to a banker's coup? You know, I look at this. They talk about $100 billion Greece owes, and they do have a big out-of-control welfare state. Then they get $1.4 trillion. They plan to leverage it into derivatives. And now they're announcing, oh, we want this European superstate that the countries can't leave. And the collectivist bureaucrats owned by the big mega banks are saying they're going to raise everybody's taxes to pay off the giant debts that the mega banks have accrued. And then the mega banks threaten to sue the welfare class on the middle class if they don't pay up the ransom. I mean, is Goldman Sachs trying to destroy the world or take it over? Or what's your view on this authoritarian superstate power grab they're involved in the name of saving the European Union?
Alex, you're exactly right. What unfortunately is happening for all of us is the politicians are trying to keep their jobs. The bankers are trying to keep their jobs. Everybody's trying to keep their jobs. Unfortunately, eventually the money runs out, and it's running out. The world, the Western world anyway, for the past 50 years, has been spending huge amounts of money it doesn't have. We've made many mistakes, but to keep doing that, you have to restrict people's freedom more and more because you want their money. So you can keep your job and you can continue to buy votes. It's not good. It's not going to work. As I said, there'll be more social unrest, more governments failing. But in the meantime, everybody says, give me, give me, give me. You promised me this. As I said, eventually the money runs out, and the world's going to find that out. Now, Alex, while Europe has a huge problem and is making a lot of mistakes, we in the U.S. have worse problems. We're a deeper debtor, a bigger debtor than Europe. Alex, may I suggest you move to Asia? Call your wife. Tell her we'll meet her at the airport. And because in Asia, people save and invest over 30% of their income from dawn to dusk. They don't expect a free lunch. The largest creditor nations in the world, Alex, are China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. You know who the largest debtors are and where they are. I don't like saying it, Alex. I'm an American voter, citizen here, but people have to face reality, and we're losing more and more of our freedoms daily in the name of democracy.
Incredible. And it's sad to have to talk like this, but we have to recognize the problems if we're ever going to fix them. Why do you think they've set up this whole Homeland Security grid? Because I was sent by law enforcement 3 years ago the MIAC and Homeland Security reports that made national news, where internally it's not about Arab extremists or any of that. The whole thing was gun owners, conservatives, libertarians, in the Feders, Ron Paul supporters, but mainly people that don't like the Federal Reserve cartel. And then now we've got all these police training videos where they actually pack them in and actually demonize the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Judges are saying in court, I don't want to hear that damn Constitution, actually using that as a quote. I mean, for me, Homeland Security is the rear guard action by the crony capitalist who know they've committed all these crimes and want to try to bring a police state in to protect themselves from the population. What's your view on that statement?
Well, Alex, you're right. It's just a study of history that as governments, people, countries start out very democratic with lots of freedoms, but then in order to maintain, you have to get some more money. And the way you get more money is you start restricting people. I don't like saying it, as I said, but you know, we in America have lost more and more of our freedoms from what we had once upon a time. It's getting worse. They're now in our bank accounts. They're in our bedrooms. They're in our garages, everywhere. They can come and do whatever they want to without a search warrant anymore. I mean, some of the things that have been happening, if you had said 50 years ago, 80 years ago in America, they're going to come into your house without a search warrant. I mean, they would have laughed. They would have paid no attention to you, whatever. These things are wrong now, Alex. It's part of the gradual decline of democracy and individual liberty. Yeah, I don't like saying it, but one's got to face reality.
Well, now they're saying they're going to put microphones and cameras in the street lamps and have forced inoculations. I mean, it seems to never end. Jim, in the time we've got left with you, and I'm very thankful for your time, and hopefully this can be the first of many interviews, because Jim Rogers, if you just tuned in, Mr. Rogers is one of the preeminent geopolitical analyst when it comes to breaking down past trends, current trends, and future trends. And he's proven that with all of his investing success and the different funds he has. I mean, I understand that you've given a lot of advice, in the last few years that's proven very successful on commodities and things like that because of global concerted devaluation of currencies. But speaking to people, out there who are laymen and don't understand this, can you break down why you're saying get into commodities versus even so much stocks in the future, and break down kind of a region by region perspective on what you see is coming?
Well, Alex, my family and my portfolio is mainly commodities and especially agricultural commodities and precious metals. We own all commodities because the great shortages developing. For 20, 30 years, we had a big bear market in commodities. Very little money was spent on productive capacity. The last lead smelter built in America was built in 1960. I could go, the average age of farmers in America is 58 years old. In Japan, it's 66. We have huge supply problems facing us with all commodities. So that's why I'm long. If the world economy gets better, I'm going to make money because there's shortages. But if the world economy doesn't get better, I'd rather own commodities, real assets, because they're going to print more money. Plus, you have shortages. In the 70s, world economy was in trouble everywhere, nearly everywhere. And stock markets did nothing for 20 years. Yet if you owned commodities, you made a huge fortune. We had one of the great bull markets in world history in commodities at a time when economies and stock markets were in the tank. So we own commodities because I expect there to be more shortages, more problems, more money printing, and that's how you protect yourself. I have sold short emerging market stocks, European stocks, American technology stocks, because I see more and more problems coming. And the way to protect yourself, in my view, is to own real assets, whether it's silver or rice, whatever. Get yourself some real assets.
Jim, specifically for just say somebody who makes $60,000, $70,000 a year working here in the United States, running their own little business or something, they obviously aren't going to be able to run out and buy farmland. And they're not going to be able to buy a whole bunch of silver. But even a little bit would help, wouldn't it? What's your outlook on silver right now versus gold?
Well, I own both. I'd rather own, if I had to buy one today, I would buy silver because gold is near its all-time high. Silver is 30% below its all-time high. I'm not buying either today, Alex, but if one, I would buy silver. And if you don't own any raw materials, commodities, go out and buy yourself some silver, even at today's prices, because you got to get started. And yes, $60,000 or $70,000, your money's got to be somewhere. I'd rather have it in real assets than currencies which are being debated daily around the world.
Looking at the Federal Reserve briefly, Ron Paul's a big critic of it because of the secrecy and because of the fact that they obviously help out insiders. But they've got a big PR campaign going. They've been on record now publicly attacking folks that are upset about their crony capitalist anti-free market policies. Now some memos and documents have come out that they're basically going after Ron Paul and others behind the scenes. They are creating a database of Americans that criticize them. That came out a few months ago. What is your view, not just on the Federal Reserve, but its European central bank counterparts, and now they're open calls for a banking world government run by the very same people that have gotten us into this Ponzi scheme?
Well, I don't think world government will work, because I've been around the world twice. There are too many different kinds of people. They're not going to put up with a single dictator anywhere. That's not practical. Somebody could try it. It will not work. Napoleon tried it. Lots of people have tried it. It's not going to work, I assure you. But as far as central banks, in America, we've had 3 central banks in our history. The first 2 disappeared. This one's going to disappear too, Alex, because They keep absurd mistakes. I mean, 5 years ago, the American Central Bank had $800 billion of government bonds on its balance sheet. Now it's got over or nearly $3 trillion of garbage on its balance sheet. They've been buying up all the garbage in sight to save their Wall Street friends. And that's Timothy McGeithner, for instance, the Treasury Secretary, because he bailed out all his friends on Wall Street. So they said to Obama, give him the job, give him the job. So central banks around the world, for the most part, are not doing a good job. And we'll get rid of them. The world without central banks will have problems, as we've learned. But unfortunately, a world with central banks, or like the Fed anyway, and the Bank of England, are going to be worse. They're running up staggering debts that you and I have to pay for, and our children, and they're printing huge amounts of money. So they're going to destroy themselves. Between Greensky, they will definitely destroy themselves. But in the meantime, we have to put up with them. Now, there's some central banks that are reasonably good. We just happen to live in a country, be citizens of a country which doesn't have a sound central bank.
Jim Rogers is our guest, and he's, again, been very gracious with his time. JimRogers.com. If you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. We're using the Infowar to fight the creation of a global dictatorship, a prison planet. The Chinese said last year that the U.S. would probably lose its AAA plus. Now it's gone to AAA. I know, I remember reading articles where you were commenting on that as well. Now we have seen that happen. Geithner said it would never happen, and the Chinese laughed at him. When he said we won't devalue the dollar at that university, they laughed at him, 2-3 years ago. Now the Chinese government and others are saying, look for another downgrade. Obama has come out and admitted that Americans are lazy sometimes. He means his supporters are, not the average American actually paying for his supporters. But what is your view on the downgrade? And after the Federal Reserve and the insiders have destroyed America, will any of them go to jail like Bernie Madoff? Because he said, hey, when I got to Wall Street, I learned at this level it's all a Ponzi scheme. And so I guess Ken Lay and Bernie Madoff, I mean, are they just smaller players in the same system that's become totally criminal? So your view on the downgrading and then Bernie Madoff.
Well, Alex, first of all, you should not listen to Geithner. Go back and look at his record. He's never, ever been right about anything. It's a start. Look at Bernanke. He's been in Washington 7 or 8 years. The man has never been right. It's terrifying. And yet people pay attention to him day after day. 4 years ago, the Federal Reserve, the head chief economist at the Federal Reserve wrote a scathing paper saying all the people who say that housing is going to be a problem and we're going to have serious problems in America are nuts. How can they possibly say things like that? We have hundreds of the best PhDs in the world working for the Federal Reserve. We're a lot smarter than any of them, and they're nuts. You know the rest of that story. It keeps happening. The guys have gotten it totally wrong, keep getting it worse, getting more and more wrong, and making things worse for all of us. You look at the former head of Fannie Mae, totally crooked accounting, total fraud, sham, guys walking around with tens of millions of dollars. He yanked out of the system. No, nobody's put in jail, not touching, because he's a big political type, living in Washington with lots of friends, and Fannie Mae at one time was the largest contributor to politicians in America. So no, if you're connected with the right people, unfortunately, you walk away, nobody touched you. Madoff obviously was a criminal, obviously should be in jail, but there are lots of other people who should be in jail too. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the ones in Washington are not going to go to jail. It's not good. It's not at all the way the system is supposed to work. It's happened now. 10 years ago, America used to complain about crony capitalism in Asia. Boy, Asia has nothing like the crony capitalism in Washington, D.C.
Well, Jim, things always seem to get a lot worse before they get better, and that's what's scary is, historically, from studying history, we've got so much further to fall before people actually wake up. But I think Ron Paul being so popular and my website being so popular, your information being so popular, I think is a testament that we're beginning to turn the tide. I do see the beginning of a very deep, really huge awakening taking place. In closing, I mean, are you starting to see the beginnings of that same awakening, or what's your view on that?
Well, of course, because things are getting worse. But unfortunately, Alex, if you study history, you will see that countries that get themselves into this kind of bind don't really do anything until there's a crisis or a semi-crisis. We haven't had even a semi-crisis yet. But, as I said before, we're heading that way. And maybe when things get really, really, really bad, we'll react and do something. The risk, of course, is that throughout history, people have often reacted to the crisis or the semi-crisis with a man on a white horse, a strong general, a strong dictator. America's getting more and more dictatorial in our policies and our practices.
And look at all the push for war. Briefly, what's your view on all the warmongering?
I would not be involved with any of these wars. In my book, I wrote to my children. I said, everybody who's been in your family since the revolution has served in the military, including me. But when the next war comes, just get away from the war. Nobody's ever won a war. Even the people who think they've won a war, wars are not good. They destroy humans, capital, everything. So I've urged my children to stay away from wars. I'm probably more anti-war than anybody you know, because wars have never been good for anybody except a few generals who win.
Yeah, as Spenley Butler said, two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, war is a racket, and it took him a long time to finally figure that out. Jim Roger, let me just say bye to you as the show ends here. You've been very gracious to spend this much time with us while you're working out, and I would love to have you back up when you're done traveling here in the next month to talk about all the other issues that you're researching. JimRogers.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Alex.
Wow, folks, it looks really nice there with the jungle behind him. Texas is great too, but I tell you, the sirens call to get out of Dodge, but we're going to try to save this republic. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. Thank you so much for watching tonight. We had Jason Burmis, investigative journalist, on earlier. If you missed it, getting into the whole Penn State cover-up, and local newspapers with the headline, is this whole thing a state secret? Because it goes a lot deeper. And we, of course, covered all the censorship of Ron Paul because they're scared of those ideas. I'm Alex Jones signing off from the front lines of the InfoWar. Hopefully we'll see you back here tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Central. God bless.